GM friends, and welcome to the Future of Gaming. You're listening to our weekly FOGcast. It is a very special episode because we have a very special guest on the podcast. We have Eric Kress, who's a principal of Gossamer Consulting Group, and he's also a podcast host at Deconstructor of Fun. Is that your official role there, or are you just someone there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah. I guess I'm the host now that Mishka's shackled by the Sony corporate PR.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm in charge for now.
Fantastic. Good. And then we also have the usual Devin Becker on with us. Hey, Devin.
What up?
And then me, Nico Vereecke. And today we will, as usual, not try to predict what we're going to talk about because that varies wildly and we never manage to follow our script. So we're just going to jam. We're going to talk about the future of games. And then my first question, well, maybe, Eric, you're a consultant at Gossamer Consulting Group. What is, you would say, your comparative advantage? Like, what do you know that others don't?
Well, I mean, I'm competing generally with so my primary job is consulting for hedge funds that make investments in the publicly traded names. So my primary competition is the Wall Street banks like Goldman, Morgan Stanley, Wedbush, those type of things that have analysts that cover video games that really know little or nothing about video games, right? So my real advantage is that I've actually worked at video game companies, right? So I've had half my career working for companies and half my career covering video games. So I actually kind of know what's going on or how it works. So, or how the sausage is made, so to speak. So that gives me a huge advantage because I have lots more perspective on things that are happening in the industry and what that means. And I think that's what my clients value the most, is that kind of perspective.
Got it. Good. Appreciate that. What are you working on mostly now these days, Devin? Because we don't talk about ourselves enough, clearly.
Yeah. I mean, still doing a lot of stuff with Navic, as well as doing work on the Web3 analytics stuff with Nami, which I think we haven't really spoken a lot about, but I think will be really cool. Hopefully we'll have a lot to talk about in the near future for the cool stuff we're doing there in terms of like really digging into analytics from the Web3 side of things, but also I think, as Eric, is familiar with the Web2 side of things, could use a lot of analytics that bridges over stuff, just because like the Web2 analytics stuff doesn't necessarily work super great with blockchain stuff. Like the example that I like to use is LTV is one of the early ones we're trying to do, just because value works pretty differently on the blockchain. So we're trying to figure out, okay, well, what do you do if people are doing stuff with tokens on the blockchain? How do you actually convert that to dollars? Does it make sense to always convert it to dollars? Stuff like that. I think it's tricky problems to solve. Pretty interesting stuff. And I think we'll have hopefully some cool beta demos kind of in the near future. We're just working with partners right now to build out stuff that actually people can use with actual games, which I think is a fun way to do it, right?
Sorry, backing up. Is this your company or is this Navic?
Yeah, I'm a Nami. I know they start with the NA. Like, it gets confusing. Even my fiance is always like, which one are you talking about again? But yeah, I'm a co-founder of it, and I do like the game side of things for a lot of it, just because I also come from a game background, like yourself, kind of.
Oh, that's actually very cool. I'd like to talk to you about that. I didn't know you were doing that because I also consult for Forte, so I'm trying to understand what's going to happen in the Web3 space by looking at the products that are out there. And man, it's horrific. The products are so bad. Yeah. It's like, I mean, there's some diamonds in the rough here, but I'd love to see how you're actually triangulating and trying to figure out how these things are performing, because every metric I look at looks just worse than the last. It's like, it's like esports, right? Like it just gets worse and worse. It's like I don't know, like how people can be like really excited about what's happening out there.
I feel the same way about like esports. I actually I write the Nami Nexus that we put out, and the last one was just about esports specifically. Like I think esports is kind of a dodgy industry to say the least at this point, just because like the business model doesn't make any damn sense. Like I did the commentating for like almost 6 years, and so I saw it from the inside, and it was like, I don't know how anyone's making money in that space without it being just a constant grift piled on grift. Like I feel like it's worse than Web3 sometimes. Like personally, I think there's great people in the industry, esports, but like the business model is nuts.
Yeah, who's the guy at Navic that covers esports that's at Bitcraft? He just did a podcast about it.
No, it's Sebastian. I wouldn't say
Sebastian.
he's not at Navic. He just went on for an interview, but continue.
I listened to this podcast, and it was like everything is fine. Like, hey, we're good. Like, we're up and to the right still. You VC guys are just blow my mind. Like about like how like crazy. What I don't even understand. Like how you can be in a mindset where every piece of evidence is against your whole perception.
5
of the
minutes
world.
in, and
Like,
Eric's
so
already
weird.
tilted.
It's
a great
so
podcast
weird.
already.
I really do like some of the. Well, I like the fact that Navic has a bunch of different, cool, interesting people that are covering different things at different perspectives than me, and so some of their podcasts are really good. Some of their hosts are not so good, but like, but anyway, I love listening to it just to hear it. But it's like I don't understand. I have no idea what he's thinking because he's clearly a smart guy. But no, things are not going well in esports. They're not going well in blockchain. You know, they're not going well in VR. They're not going well in AR.
You know,
and
like
mobile.
I would put one counterpoint kind of to that though. Like, so the thing that always cracked me up, since like I didn't really ever like work directly for Ubisoft. You know, I was always kind of like under ESL or FaZe or whatever. But I did get to like see, you know, like how Ubisoft worked and things like that. But it always cracks me up seeing their earnings call because like the only game that's really kind of carried them for the last like feels like 4 or 5 years is Rainbow Six Siege, and then occasionally something else, which is their only esports title, and they took them forever to kind of like figure out how to do esports, put their money into esports correctly, like, and I see them kind of sometimes it seems like siphoning money that Rainbow Six Siege makes to go dump into another failure of a game, time after time.
But Rainbow Six isn't surviving because of esports. It's surviving because it's a great business model and it has a dedicated audience that keeps playing.
But I just mean, like, they spend tons of money on esports, and obviously they're getting something out of that, or they wouldn't be like as a marketing vehicle, right? Like,
exactly. That's my whole thesis on esports. Is as a marketing
it's just
vehicle.
marketing. Like
perfect.
from the brands side, from the sponsor side, from the game developer side, it's just like 3 marketing budgets combined to try and keep the thing going, right?
And if you talk to Riot, that's all they ever thought it was going to be. He's like, we don't break even. They said a million times, we barely break even on these tournaments. All we do is it helps keep the players engaged, keep coming back and spending more money on bullshit, you know?
Right, and I don't think esports is necessarily carrying Siege, but it's just funny that it's the game that like has their biggest marketing spend in that sense, and it's the only thing seeming to be successful, you know, what is it, 7 years, I think, in now? And like they've never done a game that's like lasted that long.
Are you trying to trigger me on Ubisoft? Is that was the whole point?
No. I just think it's funny because it's like looking at the earnings calls. You're like waiting for it to be like, oh, this game that we just dumped out was successful, and it's almost always every year. It's like, well, you know, we gotta admit, I guess Rainbow Six Siege carried us again this year, guys. I don't know, it cracks me up. I mean, obviously, I would like. So when I first started on that game in year 1 as a commentator, like I was like, this game is amazing, but it's probably going to fall on its face and fail because they were, you know, struggling through everything. Like you were on a contract to contract basis, and I'm just waiting. Like, all right, well, this is going to get canceled soon. It was a fun ride, and it's still going. It cracks me up.
It's it's really interesting. I'm curious to see where all the big esports orgs go because I recently saw that FaZe made what it was like $53 million in loss, and their share price from $1 billion IPO is like down 99% or something.
like that wasn't predictable. Jesus.
Yeah, exactly.
What do? They sell merch, right? I mean, is that really their business?
Yeah.
Hey, they've got like NFTs, right? They can make money off that, can't they?
They actually they were heralded as one of the better NFT launches.
I think G2 actually did some okay stuff, if I remember right, but I didn't really watch FaZe's stuff. I don't know.
I don't know, man. I think that's also it wasn't done as well as it could have been. But yeah, I know from like firsthand that I would say that probably 9 out of the 10 biggest esports organizations are seriously losing money, and a lot of it. So, let's see where that ends up. So, Eric, you mentioned things like the Metaverse. You mentioned things like esports. You mentioned things like Web3, things you're not bullish on for the foreseeable future. What are you bullish on in the foreseeable future, or are you just down on everything?
No, console PC, man. I mean, that's where all the market is right now, and that's probably the next 3 or 4 years. Right, with this generation of consoles, probably going to be the biggest ever. and then the next generation will likely be bigger than the last. As what happened last generation of consoles, that market continues to be super robust and strong, and the right demographic that spends lots of money, and that is not. And I wouldn't say that the demographic or the business is actually growing from the perspective of user base, maybe on the margins, particularly for Nintendo, maybe. But like, forget Nintendo for a moment. If it's just PlayStation and Microsoft, I think they just have a stable user base, and they get older and younger to some degree, but it's a stable user base of a couple 100 million people that will pay whatever it takes to get the best content available. And so that's what's actually going to be bullish for the next, I think, maybe 3 years. And then I am still bullish on the metaverse from the perspective, not Matthew Ball's version of metaverse, which is ridiculous, but Epic. I think what Epic is doing is really interesting, and we could go into that a little bit. I have some concerns, as I always do, but what I do believe is that since it is built on a very robust engine, it should be able to attract some of the same audience that is participating in this amazing console PC generation. So I think it'll be really, really interesting to follow that to see how well it does, and if it's really additive or is it cannibalistic. That's my biggest concern right now.
I have a bunch of questions, Eric. One,
okay.
If I look at the market's growth within games, it's basically only mobile, and PC and console are either flat or down. Why this sudden change, or how do you see the opportunity still in consoles and PC?
Well, I think the consoles just had a huge problem with hardware during the pandemic, and now that is alleviated, they're selling like gangbusters. And so we should get up to the peak install base within the next 2 years, and during that time, there's like insatiable demand for content. When something like Harry Potter, which is a great game, by the way, I'm not throwing shade on that, it's going to sell like 18 million units by the end of the year. Dude, that's insane, right? Like, that doesn't happen, right? Like these games, I mean, it's a great game, but like, so, and then, obviously Call of Duty just sold off the shelves last year because it was an amazing game. And then we're going to have Jedi, which is going to do over 10 million units easy in freaking April, and then the lineup is just amazing this year, and it'll continue to go for the next 2 or 3 years as the content catches up. Because I do think COVID and work from home was just an absolute horrific for game development. Just not good. I know people are, well, we're not going back to the office ever type sort, but like when you're in a creative industry, being at home was just caused all kinds of challenges for game development, created all kinds of delays. And I think that's been alleviated now, and we're seeing more and more content starting to come. So that answers your question, right? I think that's the primary driver of the console business is hardware, right? When you don't have hardware, you don't sell software, right? Now we have hardware, we should sell software. It's like that simple, really.
I'm really curious what you think about Nintendo going forward then, because like every other hardware that they've done has kind of flopped. And like you saw what they did with the Wii to the Wii U, right? Where they kind of were like, let's kind of extend the success, and then just horribly botched it. I mean, do you see the potential for that to be like the Switch 2 to be like Wii U, or that somehow they just try and keep the Switch going forever? Like, I don't know where they go from here, and I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, I mean, the thesis has been that, well, the thesis has always been that they were going to do the iPhone model. I mean, that's my thesis anyway. So I've been really bullish on Nintendo. The problem is the Switch 2 is just so delayed. It should have been released 2 years ago, maybe. Was the right timing for a new device that has better capabilities from both hardware and networking and all the other stuff. Because the Switch itself is a terrible device, absolute terrible. I mean, it's an amazing design, but it's a terrible in terms of components, right? Even the Wi-Fi chip is garbage. It's crazy. So anyway, what I think is going to happen that's different for Nintendo is that it is going to be an iPhone model. So the Switch 2 is just going to be another Switch, just with better graphics and better capabilities, of which everything would be backwards compatible, right? So there is no transition between Switch 1 and Switch 2. The problem is they've delayed it so much that the transition is going to be quite dramatic, right? More so than it should have been. But having said that, it still alleviates this big issue of the risk around coming out with a hardware device that no one wants, like the Wii U, or back in the old days, the GameCube, right? Which was awful as well. So it's like, so what it should do is eliminate a lot of the transition risk that people see in Nintendo, generally speaking. And so that's kind of what I'm expecting. And I still kind of expect, I think in my predictions, expecting to see the Switch 2 this year in holiday, announced in September, probably, maybe a limited run, but it is coming, right? It is coming. And there's some evidence out there, like an Animal Crossing SKU that's going to be up-resed for Switch 2. So we'll see. And I think Zelda is actually going to be an amazing game for Switch 2. And there's a Mario game coming, in theory, after the success of the Mario movie. So I'm bullish on Nintendo. Very bullish on Nintendo, generally.
Fantastic. What you were not bullish on was Matthew Ball's version of the Metaverse. What's up with that? What's wrong with it?
I thought the book was an amazing book in terms of where we've come and where we are. But his whole prediction about the Metaverse is ridiculous, right? On its face, like the notion that we're going to have some ubiquitous standard around the Metaverse, like the internet, and that ship sailed decades ago when tech started happening. Like these standards for the internet only exist because it was done by the government, right? And the standards themselves are not as well, good
half of them
as
have
they
disappeared over time too. Like,
right?
It's not really standard as one thing. It's like a bunch of different things that hodgepodged.
And so, like, what I like about Matthew is that he's an intellect, right? He's like far smarter than me, clearly, right? And he's a professor, right? And so he writes this book like a professor, and I think it's worth reading for everybody. But there's just no way we're going to have standards around the Metaverse. Period. End of sentence. Right? Governments are not going to get involved, and even if the U.S. government come up with some standards, there's no way that China, Japan, Korea, like, there's too much money at stake for that to happen. It's going to be run by businesses, and we already see. And my definition of the Metaverse is we've already seen Metaverses exist for decades. Like whether it's World of Warcraft, The Sims, GTA. But now we see, Roblox and now Epic, building their own thing. And that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a collection of interactive social experiences that appeal to different types of audiences, which is what makes most sense to me, So, yeah, I don't think there's some ubiquitous standard. And he's kind of backed off on that, too. He's like, look, I think, my expectations were that this would take a lot quicker or I can't remember exactly what he said, but he basically backed off on the idea that there's going to be ubiquitous standards. Like, it's going to take a long time for that to happen, if at all, I think is what the right approach to be.
So are you telling me there's going to be no interoperability? That's what I've been dreaming me of, man.
No.
Not
in my lifetime.
Okay. Good. I think that's fair.
If you just think about the logistics today about bringing a Call of Duty gun to any other ecosystem out there, right? Impossible, right? Impossible, right? It would develop on their end, development on every other platform's end. Like,
they're pretty generic, man. I'm surprised they don't just ship stock with Unity.
That's just not the way the world works. Yeah. You think Call of Duty is going to share their stuff with other people? No. Why would they? That's ridiculous. I mean, Epic has a chance of doing it because it benefits their platform, but it's still going to be within their own ecosystem.
Right, they're an engine seller at that point.
Yeah,
right?
but even if Epic were to do it, and I'm just talking out of my ass here, right? Even if Epic were to do it, like, sure, it would work for that universe of Fortnite type content, Fortnite type players, and that audience. But would that work for The Sims? Or would it work for Candy Crush? Like, no. No, there's no ubiquity there. It's just different groups of people playing different games on the platforms that they choose to play on, right? There's different platform use cases as well.
Well, it's like pretty easy to break apart into different conversations. Like if you're talking about conversations of like file formats and transfer of like the actual content in that sense, like the audiovisual thing, or is it, you're talking about like functionality or like game balance. Like there's all these different things that you like, if you tear apart, then some of them are a lot easier to do than others, right? But it's like, yeah, like you're not gonna be able to bring game mechanics between games, right? Like unless they're using some kind of shared engine, that works between them, why would that even make sense, right? And that's the problem, is like this conversation, like you mix in virtual worlds with the idea of UGC platforms, you mix in like game mechanics with art assets, and you're like talking about 5 different things at the same time. It's like, well, fuck, none of that's gonna work if you're talking about everything at once. Like, yeah, why would that work?
And why would you want it to work?
Right. That'd probably be stupid at the end of the day.
It doesn't. Yeah, there's no incentive. There's no mutual incentives to do what they're suggesting, what Matthew was suggesting.
Mm-hmm. What gets you excited about Epic Games specifically? Is it the network effect they've created around Fortnite, or is it the engine side, the Fortnite creative mode?
I think what I like about Epic's approach versus like Roblox, for instance, is that they have a tool that can be used to build content within their world. And if the game is good enough, or if you choose to, you can export it into a real engine that can you can create a game for Steam, or to sell as a standalone game, right? So while Roblox is a great tool and technology for Roblox, I don't think that tool and technology really kind of transcends that. It's just basically built for that audience. And my opinion on Roblox is it's for 8 to 10-year-old kids, right? And that's not scalable, nor is it like interesting longer term, right? But I think if Epic does it right, and these tools and technologies ultimately basically merge into Unreal 6 and make it almost seamless to build experiences and create them for outside of that ecosystem, I think that is super compelling and super valuable to the entire ecosystem, for that matter. And then back to my original concern, then I start to get concerned about whether or not this could be really cannibalistic, right? So, for instance, one of the guys was telling me, like, within like the first like 3 or 4 hours, they built the entire level from Finals, the game that's coming out, Final, whatever that game is, the shooter. So someone was able to recreate the entire map of both Call of Duty and Finals in a few days. Now obviously the gameplay is not going to be quite as tight and good. I'm just saying, like that's the kind of power that this tool could have, and that could be a challenge for some, the established AAAs, right? So, but anyway, yeah, I just think Epic is on the right track from that perspective. And then the other thing is the economic advantage. We'll see how that plays out, but the fact that they're giving up 40% of their revenue to pay creators, not based upon whether they can monetize, but based upon engagement, which is that's crazy, right? That's pretty generous, right? And obviously that will change over time, but that's a really let's say a very lucrative way to start, I would say, for game developers, versus Roblox, which is a disaster for creators, really. Mm-hmm. Except for the biggest.
So as a team that has a proven ability to ship good games, which is something that we at Bitcraft look for, do you think today it's really worth having a good look at what Epic's doing to potentially like start there, and then, if it works out, take the code base and build it into a standalone game?
Good question. Could you use it as a testing ground for content to publish? Yeah, why not?
How much can you actually mod with it? Like, can you build like full on game mods with it, or is it more just like throw some stuff together in a Fortnite level? Like, I haven't played with it, so I'm kind of curious if you've looked into it more and what you can actually do.
No, as far as I understand it, it's going to get more and more robust, so that you could build out almost anything you could imagine that you could build on Unreal. I imagine you could build Diablo in this tool ultimately, right? Now, I don't think that's the case now. I'm not suggesting it is, but it's possible, right? Basically, anything you can build in Unreal, you're going to be able to build with this engine.
So it's more like an entryway into building for Unreal, is what you're kind of saying.
Yeah, sorry, maybe I'm not being clear.
That makes total sense. Like, because the most genres were created from mods, like over the last like 2-3 decades, right?
Right.
And so like I would think there's a good chance that could be then the platform, and then of course the game, when it branches off to its own thing, then uses Unreal, and that's beneficial, of course, for Epic, right?
Right. Right. And I think anybody that's building in Roblox should be dedicating resources to this, because I think this is going to have much more reach ultimately to the right type of audience. Right. So
I don't know the numbers by heart. DAU, MEU wise, is Roblox higher than let's say Fortnite?
I actually don't know exactly where they're at right now. Where's Roblox? Like 60 million or something MAU?
Let's see. Let me Google this.
How many of those are just creepy adults playing?
This is why you prep, right? Because you like start throwing out stats here, then everyone's gonna be like, "You're so full of shit. You don't know what you're talking about."
We'll just insert stat here later on in post.
Your opinion is useless.
That's assuming you trust the stats, anyways, right?
So Roblox is 43.2 million DAUs.
Oh, DAU.
Yeah. Monthly, 202 million monthly active users in April 2021. So that's 2 years ago. It's just what a quick search.
During COVID, though.
Yeah, that's true.
When they weren't in school.
It's like 67 million DAUs. And let's see what Fortnite's, I think, much smaller.
Yeah, I think so too.
Should invite ChatGPT on here as one of our guests. They could just throw out the facts.
Dude, fact check us while we're speaking. It's going to be a bad experience.
Yeah.
2025 probably. But what I would argue is that the audience that you really want that monetizes the best is the audience that's playing Fortnite.
Yeah.
You know, despite how great the kids audience is in terms of parents that are willing to spend whatever it takes to get their kids off their ass, right? The 18 to 44-year-old males, or even like 15 to and older, are going to be more lucrative from a model perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where else do you think, you look at the industry from a high level, like Devin and specifically me, we look at seed stage companies. Where do you still see some opportunities, Eric?
Well, I mean, I just think that the premium market for console and PC, social experiences, like when we talk about the metaverse, my whole thing is, building an online Animal Crossing, right? Building a competitor to The Sims, right? For that type of, those are the type of opportunities that I'd be really kind of pursuing right now. We haven't even talked about mobile yet, and I've been ranting against mobile for like the last 2 years with all these changes from, what I call the Apple mobile global game recession, right? Because Apple created these privacy policies out of their ass, right? And it completely dismantled the entire UA infrastructure for gaming, right? Your primary means of marketing your games is now been completely altered and almost destroyed overnight because Apple wanted to do a privacy policy message to sell their devices, right? To compete against Google. That's it, right? I mean, clearly, right?
Well, so when Facebook kind of pulled that crap, right? Everyone kind of went over to mobile from there. So let's say, people are like, well, F mobile, table flip. Where do they go from there? Do they just go to console? Do they go to PC, web?
Console, PC, web. Done, right?
All right?
Let's do it. Yeah, move. Get out of there, right?
Migrate.
I mean, Facebook, it was even more dramatic with Facebook. They basically destroyed the whole ecosystem in like 6 months, by removing the oh my God, what's the word? Sorry. They removed the ability to advertise on the main feed, right? So your whole way of attracting consumers disappeared. Like, it was crazy. And the whole business fell apart. Right. And that's part of the problem of not having control over your platform. And that's why mobile was always destined to be a challenge, right? Because Google and Apple have way too much power over what you do. And they're not, sorry, this is the big rant that I've been doing for like years. So it's like, I'm not going to do it justice. But the reality of it is these tech companies give a fuck about mobile, about gaming, right? They don't care about gaming. That's what you have to get in your head, right? All they care about is selling devices or selling advertising, right? And so that's why Google is more aligned with gaming to some degree, because they're just selling advertising, right? But with Apple, they don't care at all. Anybody you talk to that actually works at Apple, they'll tell you they don't care at all about gaming. Gaming is not even in the discussion, right? It's about selling devices. That's it, right? That's all it is. And so, like, if that doesn't align with what they want to do, if privacy is going to sell devices, they don't give a shit about your your podunk revenue for mobile gaming. They don't, and so it's ironic. It's just irony that people really think they care. They don't, and so anyway, we'll see what happens going forward. But my prediction is it's going to get worse before it gets better with mobile, because I think fingerprinting is going to get removed. I think Google's going to do their thing now. Their privacy rules, and their privacy rules will probably be a lot better than. I mean, how couldn't they be better, right? Than Apple?
Low bar.
But they still will reduce fidelity and reduce the ability to target whales, and so it's going to be a real challenge. Mobile is going to be a slog for the next 2 to 3 years, right? Where we're going to see 5 to 10% declines in revenue in the West, in particular. So, it's a challenge, right?
Well, I'm curious about the compatibility, though, of, let's say they go to move to console, right? The compatibility of like free to play models on console, or even the way that marketing works, like, interstitial ads and all these other things. Like, how do these mobile companies move over to console? Does that even fit? Right?
It's not easy, dude. The guys that were building Facebook Canvas couldn't make the move to mobile, right? How challenging was that? Zynga imploded because the powers that be within Zynga, all they could do was build on Flash and platforms that didn't matter on mobile. So yeah, it's going to be a tough transition, and I think, and a lot of these companies like Playtika, Scopely, I mean, I have to imagine Fun Plus and all these other big, really successful companies on mobile are all in a situation in which they really need to think about building out the capability of building games on other platforms, right? And that is not an easy venture, right? So, but. As a private company, I think if you're a private company, then you have that advantage. Moon Active, Fun Plus, Scopely, to some degree, now that they've been acquired by Savvy, they're in even a better position to make that transition. I think it's going to take a lot of money, a lot of unprofitable years in order to build up the capability of building games outside of mobile.
Can you elaborate on the difference for you between the private business and public business, and why public businesses will have a harder time making that transition successfully from mobile to anything else?
I mean, it's simply, as a public company, you are dealing with quarterly earnings, right? You have to deal with an investor base that wants to see growth at all costs, right? Top line, bottom line, let's just keep the juggernaut going, right? You have no flexibility of taking 20% of your revenue and starting to invest in new teams to build console, because that means that your margins are 20% less. They're unforgiving, and that's why Playtika should have never gone public, right? I mean, it's so much more complex than that. But these companies that went public had no business being public. Like all these Polish companies went public because of CD Projekt, and like these companies in Europe going public. It made no sense. They're not big enough. They don't have enough. They're not diversified enough from a product perspective and from a revenue source perspective. They don't have the capacity to build new teams, to build new stuff. So anyway, that's why private companies just have that much more flexibility. Supercell, for instance, has even though they were acquired, right? They have the flexibility of actually retooling, and that's exactly what they're doing right now. I mean, his whole letter. We covered this in the podcast, was that they're retooling. They're they're building, right? They're building more teams. They can't be the small, scrappy group of 250 people making gajillions of dollars, right? They have to grow, build live ops capability, build the capability of building new games, prototype better. Like his whole letter. I'm not going to go through it, but that private companies have just much more flexibility to do that. Yeah.
Is there any or much opportunity in web for you? I'm looking at the announcement that Google is rolling out Web GPU, and so now we can take full use of our GPU. I can finally make full use of my 4090 that I bought on a whim last year in the browser.
You mean on browser-based games?
Yeah.
No. HTML5.
Too unreliable. I was in the early HTML5 stuff and doing game development there, and I've watched it go through the whole thing. It's too unreliable of a technology with the browsers and stuff, and it's just...
I've been doing this for 30 years almost now, and I swear to God, the next time I hear someone start talking about building web-based games using HTML5, I think I'm going to shoot myself. Like it's never going to work. Just stop it. Okay, stop. But because regardless of whether or not how well you can do on it, you're still going to sacrifice quality and fidelity and interactivity. And that's not what the customer wants. The customer does not want that, period. They don't want streaming either. Like streaming is a dumb idea because the audience doesn't care. They don't want that. They want the fidelity that provide by dedicated GPU, CPU controls. They want the experience. They don't want to deal with this bullshit. And that's the other big problem I have right now is this whole PC shit that people are talking about. People think it's like the great white hope, it's crazy. PC is a shit show, right? It's a terrible platform. And I'm a huge PC gamer. I love PC. That's all I play is PC games. But it's a terrible platform because it's hard to configure. Graphics cards are required. There's like all kinds of impediments to like creating a great experience on PC versus console, which is an easy experience to just pick up and play. You press a button and you're playing immediately, right? That's just not the case for PC. And so while I think there's opportunities on PC, I'm not poo-pooing the whole idea of PC. I hope they are because I love the PC. It's just not the opportunity that consoles are from a playability standard and for what the consumer wants, So
is there any possible new platforms then? Like, so right now, like you're talking about console, you're talking about PC, and it's like you're talking about shit that's been around for a long ass time, and none of those are like new tech in any way. And like obviously VR is not going to take off, right? We're not going to see that blow up anytime soon. Cloud gaming, you're just like that's done.
No, cloud gaming is so dumb.
Web3 we won't even get into, right? So I'm just like, what is there even anything on the horizon that like is interesting from like a new platform perspective?
So here's what I think the opportunity is, particularly for these mobile guys, right? They have. This is not going to be very popular with the console people, generally speaking, but they have figured out ways of maximizing revenue, depth of spend across all kinds of different genres, right? The free-to-play mechanics that they've developed over the last decade have been phenomenal, right? You're just squeezing as much money as possible from every customer, right? They got to bring that shit to console, right? Because that is the best market, right? And you're starting to see some evidence. And what that means is that, again, this is not popular point of view, is that you need pay-to-win mechanics because pay-to-win mechanics is what makes money on mobile, right? 99, maybe 95% of the revenue on mobile is all pay-to-win, right? Or pay-to-progress, either way. On console, though, there are many games that are pay-to-win, which include like FIFA, Madden, and NBA 2K, but a lot of them are more cosmetic in orientation, like Fortnite or even Call of Duty. Now, Call of Duty is starting to implement some crazy shit that is pay to win to some degree, but pay for advantage, right? So we need to figure out a way of melding these two worlds, right? Because what I want to make sure everyone understands is the reason the consoles are such a great platform is because everyone is on the same page. Like Microsoft and Sony want everyone to succeed on their platform, so it's like this kumbaya. Everyone wants everyone to do well on the consoles because they all make money based upon people playing, unlike mobile and Apple and even Google for that matter. So anyway, we need to figure out how to bring these mechanics to console, right? And that's the opportunity, right? Or even PC to some degree, on the AAA side. And that would be a home run because monetizing non-sports games is probably the biggest opportunity for the console manufacturers this cycle and next, because they have not done a great job of it, with some rare exceptions like Rainbow Six we were talking about earlier, and then
and that GTA, is one to pay for advantage one. That one's like surprisingly good. It's been like not aggressive and somehow managed to make money. And it's like, it is a little bit rare, I think, to be able to make, they're not making hand over fist money, right? Like, it's not crazy, but they've been able to sustain the game and actually be like one of their top earners. Like, obviously, like their other games are not doing anything other than like initial release and some DLC. So you're not going to see a ton, right? But it's still like I think there is some opportunity to be maybe a little less aggressive. But I think to your point, at the end of the day, people are paying for something. They want something for that money. So it's either going to be like something that's just visual only, which is only going to sell so much, and the game's already got to be huge for that to work, or they're going to pay for something that they can get, like whether that be, some advantage, or that be like some content that may be considered advantage, like a character that might be slightly stronger than others or unlocks it faster. Like, I feel like it's kind of a weird thing to say pay to win when it's like, well, you want something for your money. Like, you're not paying money. It's not a charity. You're not like, hey, I like this game a lot, I'm going to donate to it. That model doesn't work. No one donates when it's a donation thing, right? So you want something back in return. It's like, well, how do you make it fair? How do you make it like in a way that people aren't super pissed? But it's like, it seems like only the people that aren't spending money are the ones pissed. So
exactly.
Like,
but console people have been built on the idea of maintaining their brand and the purity of their brand and the purity of the gameplay, right? And so going against that is against their core tenets as an organization. Somewhere like EA or Activision or Take-Two or Ubisoft. But I think they got to get over that, right? And what I would argue, and this is what I've been arguing for like years, and no one's done it, is that like Call of Duty, for instance, it's not this simple, but I'm going to make it try to sound as simple as possible, is that you have a mode that is made for people that want to pay to win, right? That pay to progress or whatever. And so that there is like almost unlimited spend. Like you create this huge depth of spend mode within the Call of Duty and see who comes, right? And if you don't want to fucking participate, you don't participate, right? But those that do, and you get crazy perks. And I'm not a designer, so like it's over the top, like nonsense, right? I think that would be a great test as to whether or not
it's FIFA Ultimate Team already, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I mean FIFA is that, right? Like you can't compete FIFA unless you spend thousands of dollars, right? You can't compete even close to the highest levels. So yes, so it's bringing that again to non-sports gaming. That's huge.
The gamer inside of me just died a little bit hearing you guys talk about this.
I know. I hate it too, by the way. I'm not a big fan of it. I'm saying.
I'm a big fan of just using matchmaking to solve it, right? Like just match the people based off how much they've spent against each other kind of thing. Like not literally that, but you get what I mean, right? Like throw the whales against each other, then it's like whatever, let them duke it out. Who cares?
Yes.
Interesting. I mean, I have skill-based matchmaking is a whole other discussion that I don't know. I don't know what to think about it. It's I can see why it's important.
Let me ask you, Mr. Web3 Nico. Like I've had so many conversations with you over the years, and you are like the biggest evangelist in the world on Web3. I think. I mean, I think you hold that title because I talk to you, and I swear to God, it's like talking to a preacher, right? It ain't normal, dude. It ain't normal. So where are the opportunities that you see in the market that I'm not thinking about? Like why am I obtuse and old school and not really considering what's happening in the market?
Preach it.
So
praise
me. The preacher of Web3, I mean, I need to change my Twitter and LinkedIn bio because that's what I'm here for. So my general thesis, I have a belief that in, let's say 7 years, 2030, I think that 90+% of all games will touch Web3 in some way. And I think the majority of that will happen simply as a payment rails. I think, Web3 technologies as a native value layer on top of the internet are a strictly superior way to transact value than the current payment system. And, it currently has all of its shortcomings, and I think that will be solved. But that's just on purely transactional, and the game design itself will not revolve around much Web3. I think we'll see a bunch of Web 2.5 games that will use Web3 technologies as a way to monetize more than they would in a Web 2 world. You can imagine a CS:GO, but the skins are NFTs, right? People, if CS:GO skins were NFTs, people would be willing to spend more because there's slightly less counterparty risk, right? Slightly less. So that's number two. I think in, for example, the mobile hyper casual or more casual side of things, we're seeing Web3 technologies like NFTs and fungible tokens being used by publishers and developers to try and keep people within the ecosystem, right? There's a lot of churn from game to game. And they're trying to give NFTs to players that they can use within the different games within that same ecosystem. So they're less likely to go outside of the ecosystem and keep spending inside of it. That's another application of this technology, which you don't necessarily need crypto for. I agree with that. But I think it's a good use case. And then on the furthest spectrum, so essentially what I just described was increasing steps of the depth of these Web3 technologies inside the game itself. And then on the furthest end, I think there's the weird shit that I'm also very excited about, which is, Web3 and blockchains are more than a ledger that keeps track of who owns what, right? It's more than just a database. It is essentially a computer. And so you can program logic onto a computer. And so games that actually use that distributed computer aspect of the blockchain, I think also have a lot of potential. But I think for that to play out, especially in a big way, will probably take some more time. But TLDR, I think a large number of games will use Web3 technologies, many of them in a very light way. But I think there's many different ways how we can use this.
Well, if I were to be honest, that's not what you were selling last year. I'll tell you that much. Like,
what was I selling last year?
That seems like a lot more muted than the idea that these Web3 games were going to be taking over the market.
Maybe I was it. I should look back at some of the discussions that I had where I was trying to shill this to other people online, and probably I could find some examples on where I was more bullish than I am today. I think through this new cycle, this new bear market, I came to the realization that the onboarding and user friction problems are more significant than I anticipated, and that gamers care less about concepts like real ownership than a lot of Web3 hardcore people would like to believe. And, the added value of Web3 today does not make up for the struggles that people have in onboarding onto the blockchain. And so for that reason, I think that's probably I think the end state of my vision for Web3 is similar to what it always was, but I think now it's just pushed back a little bit and it's just going to take a bit longer.
It also sounds more like it's enabling tech than it is a revolution in game design.
I would say, yeah. I think so. The majority of games indeed will use these technologies as enabling technologies more than anything else. And I think I still haven't figured out, and I don't think we can make predictions in any way about what the size of the gaming market will be for games that use it as foundational tech for game design itself.
Right.
I would say the closest thing to it being like a transformative aspect of game design is similar to the free-to-play argument, where it starts as a monetization model sort of thing. Not necessarily being a monetization model, but it starts around financial aspects and starts to bleed into game design because of it, not necessarily enabling that of the game design, but so much skewing the game design towards whatever the financial stuff drives. And I don't think it takes over like some kind of fungus, but I think it starts to put pressure on the game design that starts to affect certain things. And if those take off and people start copying them because they're successful in some way, like free to play, then it spreads. If they don't, then it doesn't, right? Like free to play, had its stops and starts at first, and then some models became really successful that people were like, oh, well, okay, well, I can't charge fucking 99 cents for my thing anymore. It's not going to work, and started copying it. And obviously there's still failures to this day, obviously. It didn't magically make everything work, but it put a lot of pressure on people to consider that model. You see how many games try and go premium and then go, damn, I wish we would have launched free to play because we couldn't get people to buy our game off the shelf essentially. And maybe similar thing where maybe it's not the current version of the tech. Maybe there is some other enabling factor of it that's related to the financial rails or the other things that the transmissibility of objects in it, whatever, that makes it so it's okay, well, this is actually enough of a benefit. Maybe not to game players, maybe more to developers, maybe more to publishers or whatever it is, but, puts enough pressure on the people copy it. But that's a big what if, right? I don't think the current version of the tech is enough compelling, use cases to say that that's an immediate threat to game design.
Dude, I feel like I'm in Twilight Zone here, man. Like this is not the Nico I used to know. But
you haven't been listening enough to me, man. Clearly.
Well, maybe in the last 6 months I haven't been, but I certainly was listening to you a year ago. I was like, whoa, this guy's nuts.
So what do you think now about our takes?
I think this is a reasonable take. I think this is what I told you like a year and a half ago. I know. I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm saying I said very specifically. All right. Anyway, that this was enabling technology, just like AWS, right? Like that the onboarding, that the total addressable market was impossible to predict because it's the challenge of getting in there. And so the reason that everyone kept using it as a way of saying, oh, well, this is going to be like mobile again in terms of, the revolution on the industry. And I'm like, no, it's not. Dude, the total addressable market for mobile gaming was 6 billion, 7 billion, right? The total addressable market for blockchain was like a few, 100,000.
Everyone has a web browser, Eric.
Yeah, no, yeah. See, it's like, so anyway, I don't know. And then the technology side of it as well. But whatever, I think it's what your approach right now seems very reasonable. That's a very reasonable assumption. And from my perspective, I'm seeing games out there that look interesting. Like I think the CCP thing is going to be a real good test as to whether or not a team like that, who knows what the fuck they're doing in building these type of experiences, putting enabling blockchain technology in there, and to see if that actually can help them level up their game, which has been so phenomenally successful over the years. I think that's a great one. Shrapnel, I have my doubts about whether they can execute, but the idea is really interesting. But compete. The problem with that game is that you got to compete against AAA shooters like Call of Duty, right? And Apex, and that's hard to build an audience for that. But I think the ideas that they're throwing out there are interesting, but I don't know how long it's going to take for them to get.
I don't know. A lot of the extraction genre is kind of crap. So they're not competing against Call of Duty other than DMZ mode, which I don't think is highly played, or Hazard mode, which is like no one plays in Battlefield. Like it's just competing against Tarkov, which is such a more hardcore game. So depending on how they go about it, but they've also got to compete against, I guess, Dead Drop, the disrespect one.
Yeah. That one's interesting too. I saw him at the NBA Finals in Sacramento. He's out there. And it was so funny. My wife was like, "Who is that guy? Who is that guy?" And Jacob, my son, is like, "Dude, that's Dr. Disrespect." He has he's evidently 6'8". I didn't know that.
He's out here in Sacktown, man. I should have stopped by.
Yeah, evidently he's a fan of the Kings, right? I didn't know he lived.
Yeah, we got that purple light up yesterday.
Anyway, I digress. I think. Wait, what were we talking about? The
Web3 for games.
No, the
Shrapnel,
the shooter market. So yeah, you're right. I think there's a lot of games coming in this genre, like in the next 8 to 12 months. So we'll see. How,
I feel like I've been hearing that for 2 years though.
I know.
No one's actually delivering on it.
I know Blizzard's working on one as well, but I don't think that's going to be next year. It's probably the year after.
Yeah, don't pre-order that.
Yeah, let's see. I think. One last point I want to make, and I've said it on this podcast before. I think that's to go back to the enabling opportunities that Web3 brings. Eric, you mentioned that a platform with aligned incentives, where everyone's incentives are aligned with optimal monetization, is going to be like a cash cow essentially. And I think that's Web3 technologies enable a lot of revenue and monetization optimization, if that makes sense. I think because of this technology, we now can do transactions that are more than $100, right? Mobile,
right.
That's one. We could also do transactions that are fractions of a cent.
That's what I'm more excited about, honestly, than the giant transactions, which Apple now allows some amount of that, I guess, but who knows where that'll really go.
Yeah. My information is really old on this, but my general perception of the mobile market is that people don't spend insane amounts of money, like high price tickets. They buy a high price ticket, but in game they spend in very small increments. Right? It's about transaction velocity. It's not about transaction value in game. Right? So you buy currency, you spend it over a period of time, and then you buy more currency and you spend it over time. Right? That's the way the method is. I would love to be corrected on that, but that's my understanding. But nonetheless, I understand what you're saying. Incentives are aligned, right, in that way, and that was actually the expression I was trying to talk about when I was talking about the console business. Like everyone is incentivized for everyone to do well. And sorry, my last point is the reason I don't like this transaction with Activision and Xbox is because those incentives become less aligned when you have such a premier game on your platform that you own, right? So, the shooters. So who's going to make a shooter, for Microsoft platform when they own Call of Duty, right? That Microsoft does not want another shooter to do well on their platform because they own Call of Duty. So that's when things get dicey. But anyway, but Sony's still the last pure console for now, if that deal goes through.
Great. Good. So my takeaway from the past 10 minutes is that I need to spice up my take on Web3 because Eric considers it reasonable, which is...
you got the crest blast. You're good now.
I don't think that's a good thing. I need to get him to rant because otherwise he doesn't think about you,
Well, everyone comes down from their from the
back to reality.
We'll get back to reality after a while,
After a bull run. That's fair. That's fair.
Yes.
Good. Eric, where can people find you if they want to hear more?
Deconstructor of Fun, weekly podcast, Twig. I'm there every week, shooting the shit. We're going to cover, obviously, this Rovio acquisition. We covered Scopely last week. And I'm always on LinkedIn. That's kind of where I spend most of my time for social media because I'm old school.
No Twitter? Okay.
No Twitter. No, I think it would take over my life if I started making pot shots on Twitter.
I could see you get into some serious fights on Twitter, 100%.
Yeah,
start tweeting.
I got enough stress in my life, So yeah, that's where you can reach me, and and I'm always around. So
there you go.
Reach out.
I
love to get information. I'm an information broker.
That's true.
Right, so
if you got some hot takes, some insider information, I guess mostly about public companies, which I don't think a lot of we're more in the startup worlds, and our listeners are as well. But good to know. Yep. Fantastic, Devin. As usual, thank you very much, and then listener, thank you too for listening. If you made it till here, hope you enjoyed. Go follow Eric on LinkedIn. Maybe send him a connection request. I guess he likes having a lot of friends on there on LinkedIn. Appreciate you listening. If you liked this, let us know. Leave us a like, a comment. Always appreciate it. And with that, we are out, and we look forward to speaking to you in the next episode. Ciao.